Status connected. Facebook live connected. Rumble connected. Twitter X connected. LinkedIn connected. This is the booth. We are cleared to go live. Send the signal to the studio and go live.
List with Elizabeth show, ready to go live in 3, 2.
When you think selling and buying a home,
when I think real estate, I think List with Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Klein.
Elizabeth and Klein. And here is the host of the List with Elizabeth show, Elizabeth Klein.
Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everybody. I am the host of the show, Elizabeth and Klein. If there was any doubt in your mind after that amazing intro, I love that intro. It makes me dance every time. I am a residential specialist in real estate. I help families buy and sell homes every single day. And we have this wonderful show to teach you all how to do that. Tips and tricks for buyers and sellers alike. I'm very excited for today's show, but before we get started, I do want to remind everyone out there, whether you are here in the Northern Virginia area or you are watching from afar in California or elsewhere, please, the number one tip I can give you if you are going to buy or sell a home, please align yourself with a professional agent who does this day in and day out and can really help you avoid costly mistakes. If you need help connecting with a professional in your area, reach out to me. I'm happy to go ahead and make sure you get connected with someone in your area that is professional and can guide you through this as seamless as possible. And you can call me at 703-829-LIST or go to my website at listwithelizabeth.com for more information on how to get in touch with me. If you are in the Northern Virginia area, feel free to reach out to me directly. I'd be so happy to chat with you and help you buy or sell that dream home. Now, I would like to say we have an amazing guest coming on today. He is one of my friends actually at Cardinal Title Group. And my little reminder there, just to let everyone know to please like the show, comment below, and share and subscribe. It will really help the show out and help spread the word on helping buyers and sellers in the residential real estate space. So today I want to welcome Michael Palermo. He is one of our settlement agents at Cardinal Title Group. And a lot of times when I'm working with, hi, Michael, I'm working with buyers specifically, and buyers understand that there's an agent and that there is a listing agent. So a lot of times once we go under contract, all of a sudden, the buyers realize there's this other party called a title company or a settle company that gets involved, and they don't know what that is. So I wanted to take time today just to explain the role of a title company, who the title company is, what they do, how they work, and give everyone a little information. So when you get to this point in your process, you're more prepared and you understand all of this stuff. So Michael is my expert today. And Michael, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself,
Thanks for having me on, Elizabeth.
Cardinal Title Group, and then we'll start with our questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. So my name is Michael. I'm a settlement agent with Cardinal Title Group. I've been in the title industry specifically for 5 years. I've held several different roles within the industry. I am licensed in Maryland, DC, and Virginia, operating out of our Alexandria office.
Okay, perfect. So what exactly is a title company? Can you just tell us the basics? Why do they exist? Kind of just take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So a title company, what we do specifically is we ensure and facilitate the transfer of ownership of real property, right? Just very simply. We have a couple specific roles within that operation, but essentially we facilitate the transfer from seller to buyer. So that being said, at the same time, what we're going to do is we're going to clear title, right? We're going to verify chain of title, ownership, and then ultimately record the deed transferring title and possibly deed of trust if you're financing.
So back up here a little bit.
Yep.
What does clear the title mean? Can you explain that in a little bit more basic terms? What is that? Why is it important? What has to be done? Who does it impact? What does clear the title mean?
So the process of clearing title is we run a title search as soon as we receive the contract, and that title search is going to examine the public record. And that's what we call the chain of title. It's the segments of ownership throughout time, transferees, transferors, and essentially what we do is we try to make sure that there's no issues or defects in that chain of title. So that could be many things. That could be incorrect transfer of ownership. That could be, a debt from a previous owner that was not released. So there's really multiple ways, clerical errors in the transfer of title. So our process of clearing title is making sure that that chain of title is secure.
Okay, because when you buy a home, essentially what's happening is just a lot of paperwork, right? Lots and lots, stacks and stacks and stacks of paperwork. So the title company, their role, right, is to facilitate that big old stack of paperwork, make sure everything's correct, make sure everything's included. Because if in a past sale, so let's say the home you're buying wasn't done, the last time it was bought and sold wasn't done correctly, that pack of paperwork was wrong or was missing something, Michael and his team are going to catch that, and they need to clear that up before you buy the home, because if not, you're inheriting a problem, and then you may have problems selling it down the road. So the title company is super important to make sure the home you're buying, everything was done correctly up to that point in time, and that you won't have problems moving forward upon the sale. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. It's so funny too, because I remember when I started in real estate, the settlement company at one point said, years and years ago, we didn't even ask people for their IDs when they came into closing. We just, took their word for it that they were John Smith and Sandy Doe. And I guess things have really changed because there have been fraud. There has been fraud in selling a house. There has been issues in title work. There have been unpaid debts. So, people used to hide from that and not do the right thing. So now there's systems in place, right, to catch all of that type of stuff. Do you remember those days when there were no IDs needed at settlements?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, who knows who's showing up to the table? I'm selling a property. Let's say I'm on title with my wife, significant other. I'm selling a property and I come to the closing table with not my wife, and no one verifies who I am. And I say all the money from that sale comes to me, goes to my account, Michael Palermo. And, further down the road, there's a claim. The buyer has no idea, who's selling the property. They're not checking your IDs either. So really it was taken on word for a period of time until these issues arise. And then somebody says, wait a minute, I didn't sell my property, or I was an heir to this property and no one consulted me, to have me sign over my right to ownership.
Absolutely. I just had a case super recently where I had the buyers, and the title company caught an error on the previous sale of the home, whereas it was owned by a husband and wife, but only the husband showed up and actually signed the sales documents to sell the home. Well, they needed the wife's signature as well. I don't know who that title company was, but that was an example of a company that didn't do their job, right? That's a big miss. So thankfully, the title company was able to locate the wife. She was still living. She was happy to assist. She hadn't moved out of the area. They still had her contact number. She came in, signed the documents she needed to. Then their title was clear. So then the house sale could proceed forward.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
so guys, again, when you're buying or selling a house, it is so much more than just, oh, look at that pretty house. That's the one I want. It doesn't work like that. There are so many ins and outs to this process. So please align yourself with professionals along the way. Okay, let's move on to our second question here. So a lot of times clients will ask me, okay, well, Elizabeth, who picks the title company? Are there different title companies? If so, who picks the one that gets involved? And how does that process work? Michael, if you'd like to speak to that, we'll move on with that.
Absolutely. So general rule of thumb, who picks the title company is, or who is offered that selection is the buyer, right? So the reason being is the buyer's side is paying for that title insurance policy. They're paying to insure the title, so they essentially are allowed the selection of which title company is used. Now, that being said, I'm sure, Elizabeth, you know that we're in a market where the seller can make a couple more rules, right? So we're definitely seeing in contracts where a buyer submits an offer and they say, you know, Cardinal Title Group, I'd like to be my title company, and the seller says, well, actually, we'd like to select XYZ title. And to make a competitive offer, there have been compromises from the buyer's side.
The other thing that can happen is there can be sometimes a split settlement.
Right.
And what that means is the buyers still get to pick who they want to work with as a non-negotiable in the state of Virginia. Again, if you're listening elsewhere, check with your state rules and regs. But then the seller can come in and say, we really want to use Andrew Wilson Title Company for our side of the paperwork. And that's okay. That's called a split settlement. It's totally fine. But what happens is there is only one official title company, and that will default to the buyer's title company selection. So in this case, if we picked Cardinal Title Group and the seller said they wanted to close their side of the paperwork with someone else, push came to shove and we had to say who is the official title company, it would be the one that the buyers chose in the state of Virginia.
Yep. Absolutely. So. And we do see a little bit of that. It was more commonly done where there were split settlements. It's a difficult thing to try to accomplish because you have two sides with two separate companies trying to work together. So you're adding an additional piece to the puzzle. And my company, who, you know, I trust implicitly, now has to rely on another company getting payoff statements, right, on the seller side, getting HOA documents, things of that nature. So it is easier to have one company handle it. And as you mentioned, the buyer side ultimately selects that company. Now, it's since the Bureau of Insurance has issued a statement regarding some of those split settlements, it's less commonly practiced.
So I just had an example the other day. Speaking of an extra level of complexity, I have the buyers in this situation. The sellers did elect to use a different company for their side of settlement. And I usually get to review the final summary sheet of all the numbers about 3 days prior to settlement. Well, we passed 3 days, we passed 2 days. I reached out to my processor at Cardinal Title Group and I said, hey, I haven't seen the summary sheet yet for review. And she said, oh, well, remember the sellers have another company. They haven't sent it yet. So it really does add another level of complexity. Really, I mean, I think that, you know, if you, again, are you're working with a professional agent, take their recommendation as to, hey, this title company has performed really well for me in the past. I know everyone there. I can walk in and verify what's going on. If there's an issue, you know, I have that. And to your point, Michael, I did have another case where I had the buyers and the sellers were really insistent that we choose their settlement company that they preferred. Yep. And so in this case, it was multiple bid situation. So again, for ease of trying to get the deal through, we went ahead and used and selected the other company. Well, after 3 or 4 days of going under contract, we had no communication with them. They weren't picking up their phone. No emails were being answered. And my buyer said, can I switch this? And I said, absolutely. I mean, we cannot work this way. So, you know, who you pick matters. Who you work with matters. There's a lot going on here, a lot of moving parts. Things have to start to get done quickly because behind the scenes, I don't even know what all you all do, right? That all the work that you guys do takes time. We can't do everything in 1 second. So we need to have that file open immediately, have communication established, and have things rolling as fast as possible.
It does. It absolutely does matter. And that's why working with a professional like yourself who knows what needs need to be met, and working with a reputable and efficient title company, and even lender. Let's add that into the mix.
100%.
It's vital for
It's a team.
smooth
We are
transaction.
all a team working together.
Absolutely.
All right. All right. My next question for you has to do with the money, right?
Yeah.
So we know a title company is involved. Are there fees for using a title company? What are the fees? If there are fees, what are the costs? What kind of give us a lay of the land with who pays for what and how that all works?
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends on the company how they break their fees down. What we do is we have a settlement fee, a general settlement fee, and usually the average between all companies is typically between $750 and almost $1,000 for the settlement fee. We are right in the middle, but very competitive, and there's a reason for that. And the work and effort we do, the reliability of our work. But that being said, it breaks down differences between seller side and buyer side, right? They're each going to have their own independent settlement costs associated with that, either built into the flat rate or, itemized out separately. So the seller's going to pay, if they're using a title company, they're going to pay an attorney fee, a document preparation fee for the deed itself. So in the state of Virginia, we need to have an attorney prepare the deed. Rightfully so. And so that's going to be an additional cost. Some companies have wire fees associated with the proceeds. And if a seller is paying off a mortgage, we also have a fee associated with release tracking. So if they're paying off a mortgage, the mortgage company has the requirement to record what's called a certificate of satisfaction. And that document needs to be recorded in a certain period of time after the loan's been paid off. We track that and make sure that that is done so that we don't come into an unreleased mortgage. Now, on the buyer side, the buyer's going to also have their settlement fee, and that's going to include, or in addition, have your title search. Right, as we mentioned in the very beginning, that title search is the tracking down the public record in the entire history of the property. That's very important to what we do. It's very important. So there's a fee associated with that. There's also title insurance, which we'll talk about. And then sometimes there's underwriting fees associated with the buyer side as well.
So this also comes up a lot when I'm working with clients. Mm-hmm. The question, I think not the question, but the information that needs to get out there is there are two sides of settlement, right? There's a seller side, there's a buyer side. Both sides have closing costs. Right. Sometimes parties think just the buyers have closing costs or just the sellers have closing costs. Well, no, the sellers carry their own closing costs outside of what the buyers carry. Right. So I typically tell folks in our area that on the seller side, their settlement fees are less than 0.5% of the sales price. So if they figure 0.5%, that's way more than enough. And on the buyer side, for a single family, it's usually about 2.5% of the sales price. And again, that gets all broken out, and these are just kind of general rules of thumb. But there are two sides to the transaction. So when you do all the work, when Michael and his team do all the work, and then you come to settlement, and if we can show a picture of what a settlement looks like, I think we have a slide coming up for that. There we go. So there's Michael and I last week in a settlement. It's basically, you're sitting at a table in a private room. You have time to review all of the documents, all of the numbers. Michael is going to sit there and go through each single line item with you. These happen to be the sellers in this case. And then at a separate time, the buyers have their closing. It's extremely rare, at least in my experience since COVID, that the parties all sit together at the table and close together. Michael, do you see that anymore? Where everyone's together?
That's a really good point. So I do see it. I do conduct full settlements. Okay. As you know, you've been in the industry for quite a while, so you know that there used to be everybody come and sit at the same table, right? Seller, buyer sitting right across from each other,
Yep.
going through the documents and then handing over the keys at the end of settlement. Now, it is much more rare, especially since COVID. There's also a couple other contributing factors. Let's say scheduling. I can get off work this day, but the buyer can only get off work that day.
Yes.
But I'd say a handful. It's been more since COVID, obviously for obvious reasons, but I do a handful. I'd say maybe 2 to 4 a month.
Out of how many a month? How many settlements do you do a month?
Quite a few, especially when it's busy. I'm averaging probably about average 4 to 6, but on a busy day, I will stack every hour out of those 8 hours.
4 to 6 a day, 4 to 6 closings a day.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, a lot.
So it's very limited. We don't see it too often.
Okay. So probably 5% of them, you're going to be meeting with the other parties at settlement.
Yeah, approximately.
Yeah. So, I thought that was interesting to share with people too, because I think the perception is, oh, we're going to get to meet the other party at closing. Well, usually not anymore. It's just for scheduling purposes and just for ease of like getting through everything quicker. This is kind of how it's done most of the time.
And sometimes it can even avoid tension, right? If the walkthrough didn't go too well,
Yes.
And
True.
there's some concessions on either side, you definitely it's easier to have the focus completely on you. So I want to pay attention to you as the buyer. I want to pay attention to you as the seller, and you
Right.
to have my full focus.
I think too, when it's private, people are more willing to ask their questions as opposed
Yes.
to, there's 8 people sitting around the table and everyone's waiting for you to sign because everyone wants to get out of there, and you feel rushed or you don't want to look stupid and ask a question. So I think taking the other parties out of the room does give you as the buyer or the seller the breathing room to just take your time, ask all your questions, ask silly questions. No one's going to be judging you or rushing you. But yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if things didn't go well, which sometimes they don't, and you have to sit across the table with the other party, it makes a lot of stress. When this should be like, we got to the end, we're buying our house or we're selling our house. This should be exciting and not stressful.
Absolutely. We're lucky enough to be a part of one of the most important days of people's lives. And for you, it's much more than that. It can be several weeks to several months, but I think that we really have a fortune to be a part of that exciting day.
That's really neat. So our next slide, I think we already gone over this, but when does the title company get involved? I mean, right away, right? As soon as a contract is what we call ratified, which means all parties have signed on all of the terms, everyone's in agreement, that date gets stamped on the contract. On our end, we immediately send that contract over to the title company. So Michael, what happens when you get that contract? It hits your inbox. What happens from there?
So as soon as we get that contract, what we do is review it. We open the file accordingly with, who are the buyers, who are the sellers, when's contract date, what's the earnest money, right? So if there's $5,000 earnest money deposit as the buyer, we have to verify that that's going to arrive to us on time and receipt it accordingly. At that point as well, once we're done opening the file, we reach out. We make contact with all parties so that we can start working. So it's interesting. Oh, go ahead.
Tell me a little bit about how you reach out, because you use a secure portal, correct?
We do. We use Qualia.
Talk a little bit about that, because that's important.
Yeah, it's one of the strongest in the industry, if not the strongest portal. And what it does is it allows us to have a very easy and interactive communication with the clients and with yourselves as the real estate professionals, so that we can get the information we need. You can send requests, get copies of your ID, get your socials, right? All of that needs to be secure. As you mentioned, fraud earlier in the process, there's many different forms of it. And we want to make sure that no correspondence is through regular email that could be sensitive information.
Very good. Yep. And I think this does play into the next slide we had prepared. What is the title process once the contract is received? Now, if you can circle back, you said EMD, you threw that acronym out there.
I did.
Back up, explain what that is and why you get it and where it comes from and how the amount gets established, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. So the EMD, short for earnest money deposit, what that is essentially a security deposit that the buyer provides per the contract to ensure to the sellers that they will perform, they're going to follow contingencies or no contingencies, and see the purchase through to the end, right? So it is the client's assurance and security deposit that they will perform according to the contract and proceed to purchase the home.
So a lot of times clients do ask me, who gets this money? You know, am I writing a check to you? No. Don't write a check to me personally. Am I writing a check to, so the check can be held by the title company or the brokerage. So someone like Michael's group, Cardinal Title Group, will receive that money. And then if you're on the buyer side, that money is waiting for you when you get to closing 3 weeks to 4 weeks later, whenever that is, and it shows up as a credit. So if you owe X number of dollars in down payment and X number of dollars in closing costs, that amount is just sitting there as a credit to go against one of those two buckets. Precisely. Now, Michael, what happens if, because I was asked this, what happens if the earnest money deposit exceeds the amount that's actually due at settlement?
So essentially, if it exceeds, let's say you put down, you make a very, very strong offer.
Strong. You're going crazy. You put down a $200,000 EMD, which I had someone do recently. Yeah. But their closing costs come out to $85,000.
Yep. So that will be refunded at settlement. Right. So you're gonna get a check, or you're gonna get a wire per obviously what you prefer, and that is essentially an overpayment to settlement. Right. It's an overpayment of closing costs, so it will be refunded to you as the buyer.
Yes. So guys, don't be afraid to go big and go strong on your offers if you have to. If you're in a competitive situation, something like a big earnest money deposit can be the wow factor where the sellers say, geez, this guy really wants this house. You're going to get the money back. You're not going to overpay. Cardinal can't keep that money. I don't keep that money. Every single dollar and cent is accounted for on that summary sheet and must be returned to the parties, you know, as indicated in the contract. It's a contract. It doesn't matter what I think, what Michael thinks, what's in black and white is what has to happen. So you are protected that way.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many 1 cent checks I've given back because there's just a penny excess, but every single penny is important. Overpayment,
one penny. And that happens, right? Because at the last minute, the tax amount can change or the interest. I don't know. I mean, you tell me how it happens, but you see this more than I do.
Yeah, it can be for many reasons. Sometimes, let's say you close on a different date. So there's a proration for the taxes, just like you mentioned, and there's a proration for the HOA. So if typically not 1 cent, but it would change, you know, by whatever dollar amount, and that would be refunded. That can also be a result of any extra items, right? A home warranty that you thought was going to be $650 was $625. So you're going to get that refund back. And one additional possibility or circumstance that could allow that is if you were getting close to the wire, you wanted to send your cash to close on time, make sure it's there for settlement, and you were given an estimate of closing costs and they were off by just so, that would also involve a refund.
Yes. So now, and let's flip the coin, right? Let's say you sent in your estimate and you owe a little bit more. Right. I've seen people bring personal checks to the closing table just to settle up with the title company for the funds. What is the amount is there an amount that you can't take a personal check for? Is there like a threshold where the excess would need to be wired? Or
there is. We keep that bar at about $1,000. Because, you know, building on top of that, unfortunately, with a personal check, reason being is it takes time to clear, right? So when you're at closing, you're expected to have all the funds at the table. And so if, let's say, you bring a personal check for your $25,000 cash to close, and then that check doesn't go through, well, the buyer's already moved in, or, you've already moved into the house and the seller's already on their way, and it can affect disbursement.
Yeah. So point to all the buyers, be prepared to either wire your money in advance of your closing day or get a certified check. And some title companies do make you drop off that check a week before settlement, so they have time to cash it and clear it.
That's right.
Because I guess there's certified check fraud as well. I mean, there's just so many things that, could happen. Have you seen that happen, Michael, or have you had any experience with a?
I personally haven't had a certified check bounce, fortunately, but we have a process for compliance reasons, obviously, that we call, verify with the bank that check is legitimate, and we try to cash it as quickly as possible. And just like you said, we do recommend getting it done a little bit early if you're going to use a check, just so that we can ensure those funds have cleared our account. It doesn't take terribly long for a certified check. Those tend to clear quite quickly.
Okay.
But obviously the best would be a wire if you can facilitate that.
Yes. Okay, awesome. So our last bit of info here, we're going to wrap the discussion up with this last topic. There are specialty services that title companies can offer to buyers, including surveys and title insurance. So Michael, if you can just slow it down, tell everyone what is a survey, why you would want one, who orders it, and same with the title insurance.
Absolutely. So the buyer would pay for both. And in the circumstance of title insurance, if the buyer is financing, the lender would require them to get title insurance as well for the mortgage, not for the buyer.
What is title insurance?
So title insurance is a type of insurance that covers any issues with title, right? So unmarketability of title, let's say that there's some sort of issue in the chain of title that we talked about earlier that affected the seller's ability, or at that point, the seller's ability to sell their home. They were a buyer once, they got title insurance. If there was an issue that came up and they weren't able to sell their home, which we call marketability of title, that title insurance would come into play, whether they file a claim regarding a debt from a previous owner, fraud, or claims to ownership. Now, I'll jump right back real quickly to the survey. The survey is going to be something that shows you the outline of your lot. So let's say you have a half acre in Springfield, and the buyer wants to purchase that home. The buyer may order a land survey, and it shows you where the house is located. It shows you the measurement from the house to different areas on that lot, and it shows you the actual physical lot line. Now, if there's a fence on the property, if there's a shed on the property, if there's a cement retaining wall, all of those things would be reflected in the survey. The main reason why one would want to get one is I want to make sure as a buyer that the neighbor's corner of their shed isn't on my lot. I want to make sure the corner or the fence of the house that I'm purchasing isn't on the neighbor's lot. Those are called encroachments, and it can have financial repercussions, whether I have to tear down the fence, whether I have to, have conflict with the neighbor to have them fix that issue.
Also, I've seen it done when someone wants to build and they're not sure how far back their property line goes. Let's say it's a grassy area and it bleeds right into the next neighbor behind them that also has a grassy area. They want to get it staked and they want to get the markers in so they know, okay, when I'm planning for my extension or my pool, I know how far back I need to be from the boundary line. Right. So there's different reasons for getting a survey. And just like Michael said, it actually comes out, you get it as a buyer at settlement. They're going to laminate it. It looks really pretty. It's like a huge piece of paper. It's very impressive looking, and it shows you the drawing of the house, and we have to put a slide up next time. Yes. But it's called a plat, and then you can keep that forever. Some sellers or some people who own homes actually frame it and hang it on the wall because it's kind of a neat thing to have. So I've seen that when I tour homes in the past, which is kind of nice. And then just looping back to the title insurance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this like my car insurance where I pay for it every year and it goes up every year? Tell me a little bit about the purchase of it.
That is a fantastic question, and I know you know the answer. So the title insurance is a one-time premium, and it's honestly, depending on your sales price, it is based on the value of the home, just similar to car insurance or homeowners insurance. And it's a one-time fee, relatively affordable for what it covers. So it's definitely
like what would a title insurance policy, just throw me an average number on a $500,000 house.
Yeah, $500,000 house, you're looking at, it's anywhere between 0.5 and 1% of the property, usually depending on the insurer. So you're looking at maybe a $2,500 policy, possibly even lower. Okay. And that's a one-time cost. You pay it up front at closing, and that's going to cover you through most of the coverage is during your ownership or the ownership of your heirs for the property. But let's say you sell the home, the future owner has a title issue. I typically explain the owners go after that chain of title that we were talking about. So you want to be covered by that policy, and that coverage would maintain.
That's a pretty impressive purchase, right? You buy it once, you have it literally forever. So I bought my first condo when I was in my 20s, and I have long gone sold that, but I still have my title insurance policy in my safety deposit box, because if down the road there's ever an issue with a buy or sell, they could come back to me and say, this problem happened when you own the house.
Yep.
And if I have my policy, I pull my policy out, I call the number and I say, deal with this. Done, right? Basically, that's how it should work.
It is.
So you pay one time, you get some paperwork, throw it in a safe spot, hang on to it forever, pray you never need it. That's what title insurance really is. So it's a one-time cost, highly, highly recommended. And it is part of your closing costs, where we figure that 2.5% closing costs, that's lumped into that number. All right. Michael, is there anything else you want to wrap up with today? If not, if you want to tell people how they can get in touch with you and say your farewells, we'll wrap the show up.
Absolutely. Not too much more. We should definitely communicate, get into title insurance a little bit more. I could ramble about it.
We'll do another show on
so
that.
Maybe at a later point in time, we can dive a little bit deeper into what is title insurance, what are some claims that people have addressed using that insurance. But other than that, it was a pleasure to be a part of this. My name is Michael Palermo once again. I have an email and a phone number listed. My desk number is 703-817-2447. My email is michaelp@cardinaltitlegroup.com. Feel free to reach out to me if you ever have any questions, you or your clients ever have any questions, and I'm happy to address those with you, explain in further detail anything you might want to know.
I will add one last thing. Michael is also a professional photographer. After closing, he will go ahead and offer to take everyone's photo. Everyone's excited at this point. They just bought or sold a home, and usually we'll stand right in front of that beautiful photo
you're right behind me, right?
And he'll say a little to the right, a little to the left, and make sure the picture is perfect. And make sure that day has a nice touch to it. So thank you so very much, Michael. I will see you at the next closing.
Sounds great.
And thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you, everyone, for joining in today. Any additional questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Michael, and we're happy to assist. Take care, everyone, and we'll see you on the next show.
When you're ready to sell your home, don't be silly and do it alone. You gotta get Elizabeth on the phone or go to listwithelizabeth.com.